Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Finovate podcast. This is Greg Palmer, and we are continuing our conversations with the FinovateEurope Best of Show winners. Joining me today, we have Tobin Broadfoot, Product Director of Keyless. Tobin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg. It's an absolute privilege.
Yes. Well, first off, congratulations on winning Best of Show. It's obviously a high honor. And as people who are listening may have heard me mention last week, if you want to see Tobin's demo, you can find that at finovate.com/videos. All of the videos from Finovate Europe 2025 are now up there. So feel free to poke around and take a look at any of the demos that you like. But for today, let's talk a little bit about Keyless. And Tobin, your amazing demo, which was able to really capture the audience's imagination. So to begin, can you give us just kind of a quick background of yourself and what Keyless is all about for people who haven't seen your demo yet?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Greg. So I'm Tobin, and I'm the product director at Keyless. I've been at Keyless for coming up to 6 months now, but before that, I've got kind of 10 years in identity, lots working with kind of doc verification providers. I've also worked on the B2C side of the kind of fintech space with a leading consumer investment app. In terms of Keyless, we're a 100% privacy preserving facial biometric authenticator. And as I said in the demo, to my mum and dad, that means logging in and paying with your face. That's the real simple high level version of what we do.
Yeah, and again, I think it's worth taking a look at the full video for the more deep version. The first thing I have to say is it's really difficult historically to win a Best of Show award coming from kind of the security authentication space. So well done. And then the question that kind of comes immediately to mind is, what about Keyless do you think makes you unique, makes you kind of a little bit easier for the audience to wrap their heads around?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to hear that first, but also I do recognize the challenge. And I think when it comes to Keyless, we're lucky in that we sit in a space which is kind of universally understood as a pain point. So what I mean by that, when it comes to biometric authentication, we're solving the problem around remembering passwords, remembering or using SMS one-time passcodes, which everyone finds frustrating, or having to go over to open your email and your inbox. The other crucial one is what happens when you lose your device and or change your phone number. And I think what's nice in a kind of that 7-minute demo format that you guys do, which I love, by the way, it really helps because people watch the demo and they're like, yeah, that was really painful last time I did that and had to re-download and re-authenticate on all the financial apps that I use.
I think that kind of universal experience is definitely a helpful piece. And this actually, I think, is a good place to expand a little bit. Let's talk about kind of what happens in a world where Keyless isn't an option. This is sort of, the status quo that we're all experiencing. Can you talk through some of the situations that can come up or some of the processes that you're looking to replace?
Yeah, sure. So I think if I quickly, if it's okay, Greg, just talk through what Keyless does, because I've said it's facial biometric authentication, which is it's a lot of words. What we do is we process someone's face. So we basically allow you to take a selfie. When you do that, we process it on the device, and that's where the privacy preserving bit comes in. And maybe we can touch on that later. But that then basically we match that's the same. We have very high confidence. We're NIST certified. We're highest ranked on there as a commercially available provider for one-to-one face matching. So is that the same person? It's got the liveness detection in there as well. So that means when you go to a device, even if it's a different device that you haven't enrolled in yet, we can still say it's you. And that's how it's differentiated from Face ID, which is very much tied to that device. And if you know someone's passcode, you can change the Face ID. So that hopefully brings listeners up to speed on what Keyless are doing. Now, if you think about that, what makes that truly unique, but also truly powerful is that when someone does change their device, typically banks are kind of terrified at that point of like, is this the same person? Because we're very, very device based in the way we authenticate. And that's true of businesses that I've worked with. But you see that all the time. If I open up any one of my banking apps, often the first thing you see is like authenticating device. Like, do we recognize that device? And then go from there. But like I say, when people lose that, what do? And so what you then see in these experiences, banks don't want to make those experiences bad or painful or high friction. Like, I cannot stress that enough. But they end up having to. And the reason they have to is when they make them low friction and like really easy, let's say for a dumb example, just enter your password and your email. When they do that, they get flooded by what we call account takeover, which is to say other people hack their email inbox, bad actors, prey on the kind of weak passwords that too many of us use sometimes. And I think sometimes we're all guilty of that. Or they intercept SMS OTP. So all these kind of traditional factors are known to be too weak and particularly become even more vulnerable when the device isn't there to kind of anchor the whole process. So what does Keyless do? Which is to finally get back to your question, Greg. We help customers not have to rely on some of those weak factors. Now, they might combine Keyless with a PIN code, or they might combine Keyless still with one of their preferred factors that I've mentioned. But we have this incredibly strong factor, which is always going to authenticate that is the same genuine person who originally enrolled.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things that is really interesting because there are these kind of weak points that arise when consumers do things that are kind of outside the norm. And I think losing your phone is a great example there. You can't have a security system that relies on a device because people lose their devices, right? And I think this is one of the challenges that exists in the fintech ecosystem in general, is the idea that we frequently build products for people like ourselves, people who you can kind of trust and rely on to, if I get an email saying, hey, you should do this from a security standpoint, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to follow the advice of that email. I want my account to be secure. Not everybody is like that. Not everybody kind of makes the most responsible choice all the time. In fact, you could even go so far as to say most people probably don't. Even potentially people in the fintech space, right? We were talking about that a little bit. Who knows what types of password habits people might have. But I think this is one of those areas where you recognize there's a real potential for weakness here when people make what is a fairly common mistake. Phones get broken, phones get lost, phones get stolen sometimes. Sometimes you just want to get a new one because they're fun. And each one of these types of things is a potential security risk. So I think that's really interesting. Now, I want to zero in on something that you said, the idea that you don't have to store the biometric data on the device itself. This is a pretty significant line to get across. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're able to do that, what you're able to do either on the kind of technical side or on the regulatory side that allows you to avoid having to put too much sensitive information on one specific device?
Yeah, of course. And listen, I'm going to throw out terms like zero knowledge biometrics now and secure multi-party computation, and it's all going to start to sound like a bit of a word soup. But maybe the best way to start on this is, again, to kind of frame the traditional way of doing facial biometric authentication, which is done via what we typically call like centralized systems, which is you take the selfie, it sends a kind of a biometric template, be encrypted and secure and all those things. Maybe there'll be some sharding involved so that it's harder to hack, but ultimately you are going to have to send the biometric data off device, and then there'll be a vendor or the bank themselves. They authenticate that biometric template's the same, and then you get the positive response back to the device. What Keyless do is we process that biometric right there and there on the client using what we call the Keyless protocol that leverages cryptographic transformations, sort of technology that's existed for a long time. But the big breakthrough for us was that we were able to do it at speed. Some very, very smart people at Keyless kind of unlocked that trick. And once we were able to do that, the cryptographic transformation happens on the device. And then so what is sent to Keyless to say, yes, that's still Greg on the other side, that is not processing biometrics anymore. There's a level I can still go deeper than that if people have got questions, but I think that's the important thing to know. And I think one of the ways that I try to help unlock this in people's mind, which I hope is a helpful way of looking at it, is that when we talk to regulators, the question they ask is, right, if we gave you a biometric template, Keyless, would you be able to confirm or not whether that biometric template is on your servers? And the answer is no. Like, we'd have no idea, because everything has been not only transformed cryptographically, but we have a system which means that every time an authentication happens with facial biometrics, the transformation is done differently per device, per user, and per authentication. So we alter the way we do the transformation each time, and that's the kind of real secret sauce that means you could supply us with a new key, you could supply us with a biometric template, and we'd have no idea who that belonged to. And that means for the regulator's point of view, we aren't storing personal data, and we aren't accessing personal data, and we're not processing any personal data.
I think that's a really good level. And I think if anybody listening wants to get more deeply into the weeds, I'm sure Tobin would be up for that conversation. But we'll keep it a little bit more surface level for today.
Those conversations can end up being very long, trust me. But I think hopefully that's helped people who are listening.
Yeah, no, I think so. So the next question I have for you is about, after you got off stage and finished with your demo, you came into the networking space, and this is an opportunity to get some immediate feedback, both in terms of the demo itself and also in terms of what you're building. What type of response did you get from the audience at your booth after your demo? And obviously, a lot of them liked you. They voted for you for Best of Show. But do you feel like most of the people that you spoke with in that moment really understood, the details, understood what you were trying to show them?
Yeah, they did. And it was the feedback that sticks out most in my mind, which I was really pleased with, is like, I really understood it. Right. And I think that's the most pleasing one, because again, I've just talked through a lot of like word salad related to biometrics and quite technical terms. And I could have stood up there for 7 minutes and gone for that. But we focused on the thing which I was saying earlier, which is the pain point that lots of us feel in our daily lives, which are authenticating yourself and accessing your own money or your own transaction information can be pretty painful and confusing, and keyless makes that easier. And I think if you have that kind of emotional hook to a pain that all of the audience feels from time to time, then that's really helpful. So I was pleased with that feedback. Greg, your advice sort of going into the demo as well, of trying to pick out like the 3 takeaways as well, of like why that actually matters to a business, because that's the other main point. It's fine if you kind of they're like, oh yeah, that is a problem, but like, why does that problem matter to a bank? And I think that was the other feedback I got, which was like, okay, we got what this solved for our business as well. So that was it was really pleasing.
No, that's excellent. And I'm glad I could be helpful there. Certainly, it's one of those things where a little bit of experience goes a long way when you're trying to put together something like a 7-minute demo. So it looks like we're coming up on the end of our time here. I want to end by looking beyond keyless, looking at kind of this broader sphere of identity authentication in a financial institution setting. How is that shifting in the AI era? I mean, it feels like I'm always reading news stories about new types of fraud or dangers to watch out for. And I know things are moving really quickly. From your perspective, how big of a threat is this? Are the capabilities of fraudsters really evolving that quickly? What can you tell us?
Yeah, there's got to be an AI question, right?
Of course, yeah.
An AI question. It's a really interesting one. I actually think like AI is disrupting different industries in very different ways. And I think we're kind of luckier in the kind of identity authentication, identity verification, facial biometrics, document verification. I'll sort of throw that in there as well, even though it's adjacent to keyless. These threats have been around for a long time, actually, like generating fake IDs that look incredibly convincing to the human eye, and even to the tools that we have to process these images. Like, we've been kind of fighting that battle and using AI and machine learning on our side of the fence to fight those. So we're actually already quite hardened to this. What you see a lot on LinkedIn forums and at conferences is the threat of this happening at scale. So there's great, like, very kind of emotive videos you now see of, oh, look how easy it is to generate a fake ID, where I just took the image of one ID and then someone's face and merged them together, and the videos look great. The fact is, like, it's now cheaper for bad actors to do it. There's more of a fraud as a service around it, and that means that the attacks can happen more at scale. So I'm certainly not diminishing the idea of that as a threat. But if you've already, like we have, been developing the right defenses already, then actually, as long as your defenses have been good or up until this time, and ours have, and I think lots of other vendors in this industry and in this market have got great defenses against these things. Generally, touching wood, I think we're in a pretty strong position as an industry because we've had to be working on it for so long, which I don't think is true of other industries that are being disrupted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly the rigors that go on in the financial services space are substantially more than when it comes to things like media, for example, where a fake video can spread like wildfire without really a lot of due diligence.
Totally.
I think the financial services space has a lot more barriers in place to prevent that type of thing, which isn't, again, to your point, it's not to say that you don't need to be concerned about it. But I think you're coming back to the high level, looking for those areas where there's these weak points. And when you lose a device, this represents a potential weak point, right? All these kind of those types of things tend not to be that high tech. Sometimes there are high tech ways to exploit them, but the actual weak points frequently are not actually that high tech at all. It's kind of the opposite, where it's the sort of really low tech human side, where all of a sudden you have somebody else on somebody else's device. So
I agree. And and I think we've been in a position where like you say in financial services, like one fraud is a problem, and like we've had to be working really hard to get that down to zero anyway. And that's to our advantage that we've had very high standards up until now anyway.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there. For anybody who's interested in learning more, again, check out the keyless demo at finovate.com/videos. In the meantime, Tobin, thank you again for joining me, and congratulations again on winning Best of Show.
Thanks so much for the time, Greg, and thanks for the opportunity for the demo. And really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks very much.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.